Hello, Warframe stigma and all that. But let's take a moment to talk about an actual stigma in this game, that being the massive plot hole that is the primes. Before we go in, I just want to put out a disclaimer that this is for players who have been around for a while. It has spoilers from Chains of Harrow and Mask of the Revenant. What the hell are primes? That's rhetorical. I know what they are, gameplay-wise. They're elite weaponry, considered by the standards of the game to be direct upgrades from Tenno-based equipment. But what purpose do they take story-wise? We know they're Orokin tech, but I've heard time and time again that prime equipment is the progenitor of the standard issue content we use, and the standard versions we use are simply mass-produced variants. But that makes no sense when applying that idea to warframes. What we know is that standard issue frames were used out in the field quite a lot. We have plenty of bits of lore confirming it. But why mass produce a lesser technology if you have access to a better one? You could say it has something to do with scarcity, but that does not necessarily mean that they are the first variant. Prime doesn't just mean original, it also means better. Hell, the fact that Ballas had Sylvana build Titania proves that the prime warframes are not originals because Titania was not a prime. And I don't think she's an exception either. Look at Harrow, for example. His origins are widely a mystery. Aside from the fact that it wouldn't make sense for the frame to have been conceived by the Orokin, as its theme fits Rel too perfectly, DE's dedication to the fact that all warframes will be primed will complicate that even further. If the devs were to say presently that the primes are without a doubt the original variants, then it only solidifies the plot hole. One thing I thought was obvious from the start is that prime equipment is ornamental. It's luxurious, and quite needlessly so. And with that in mind, name a single ornamental anything that was the first of its kind. An Orokin makes a golden chair, but that doesn't mean it was the first chair to ever chair. Even with the scarcity claim in mind, this idea still fits because luxury items are generally scarce. We only know that some prime weapons were original, but not all of them. In fact, some of the descriptions blatantly point out that they're upgrades. But back to the warframes. As time moves on, and they continue to add lore in various ways, DE is inevitably going to pull a Valkyr Prime. Not just her appearance, but also her abilities don't make sense. It doesn't add up with what we previously had known about the standard Valkyr. From what we understood, she was a given warframe that was tortured and experimented on, and that her abilities reflected that trauma. We assumed that prior to the Corpus's experimentation, Valkyr would have had a partially, if not entirely, different set of abilities. But with the given results, DE's intent on priming all the frames does not reflect the nature of the abilities. If a warframe has been modified in any way that would suggest that the abilities had been altered, this change is not reflected in the prime versions for some reason. It forces us to believe that the given warframe always had those abilities. But the issue this presents is, how modified were they actually? Like, it implies that Aleph V didn't really do much but give Valkyr a new skin job, and that's honestly disappointing from a lore standpoint. What they did with her, they're going to do the same with Revenant. He was a warframe assigned to watch over the Eidolon energy in the planes and keep it at bay. It wouldn't make sense for him to have had Eidolon-based abilities prior to this assignment, because Eidolons never existed prior to the Gera event as far as we know. There's no traces of Eidolon anywhere besides the planes, and assuming they came right after Gera's death, the only way Revenant could have originally had Eidolon-based abilities is if he was conceived after they started coming out. In other words, he'd have had to been a post-Orokin warframe. In other words, it wouldn't make sense for him to have a prime version. And if Revenant was originally a different type of warframe prior, then his Prime version would not have Eidolon-based abilities. But it doesn't matter, because DE gotta make them Primes, nothing can stop them. We don't know a lot about Harrow's origins. All we know is that he was used as a vessel to house Rel, nothing more. The idea that the Orokin created not only Harrow but Harrow's equipment would be a ridiculously huge coincidence. You would then need to ask not only how the Red Veil procured the set, but how they even came by that set as opposed to any other. The other option is that the Red Veil and Rel, who was cut off from the Tenno and their fate entirely, somehow managed to construct a functional Warframe and Tenno weaponry. It's a more pleasing notion given that Harrow's theme fits Rel to a T, but it still doesn't make sense that they'd have the means to build such technology. So Harrow in general already presents a plot hole, but it doesn't matter, because DE gotta make them Primes and nothing can stop them. I envy those who are blissfully indifferent to these inconsistencies. I am burdened by the need to pay this close of attention to the story. I don't know if DE simply wants to leave Prime lore open-ended, but it does not work with certain lore significant frames, and we're bound to get more of those down the line. Are we, the lore whores, meant to just fill in the gaps with our imagination? Are we to cover up the inconsistencies with speculation? Why should we? I've recently made up a story in my head that fixes the Valkyr problem. Sometime in the Orokin era, the Corpus were on the rise and managed to procure a first-generation prototype called Valkyrie. Because remember, the Corpus as a faction existed well before the collapse. They experimented on it for quite some time until it was recovered by the Tenno. The data for the original model was lost, but the Tenno salvaged what they could in the form of Valkyr, and the Orokin decided to construct an ornamental version of that reverse-engineered frame. There, lore fixed. That was a relatively simple fix, but again, why should we have to do this ourselves? Nothing we come up with is canon, so coming up with solutions is only gonna be painful when knowing that it'll never see the light of day. Only reason why I even made this video is because this kind of stuff raised my cranium here and there, because I have this need to fix these little issues. It's painful. Honestly, if you're as into the lore as I am, you're probably a masochist. I hope DE would come across this and maybe address my thesis. Wait, did I even have a thesis? Well, my thesis is that Prime lore is fucked. I acknowledge that I have no clue what goes on at Digital Extremes. I don't know the workflow or anything like that, but I hope they can, in the future, analyze the lore for Warframes and determine where Primes fit and where they don't. And in the cases where they don't fit, figure out how to make it fit before it comes up, since the Prime train cannot be stopped. Well, I just wanted to get that off my chest. I have been meaning to do videos that aren't part of the main series of Warframe Stigma, because there's things that I want to talk about that isn't relative to guiding new players. I have topics for older players as well, this being one of them. Anyways, stay tuned and thanks for watching Warframe Stigma.